Um, I'm going to just jump right into the presentation. So as if you've been following TW Fitness and Tanya Whittle and all of this stuff since 2007, some of my followers have been around since the original business opened in 2007, but quite a few people still following what's been happening with TW Fitness, especially over the last 3 years. So a few months ago, I made an announcement that TW Fitness would change its branding to Tanya Whittle Wildsville Wellness. So we really branded under my name as opposed to, the way it was with TW Fitness. And TW Fitness really was an amazing business. It was over a decade of my life, and I loved every minute of it. Well, that's not entirely true, but I loved almost every minute of it. And everything that I didn't love was a very valuable lesson in life. So I have no regrets. Let's put it that way. But TW Fitness really signified fitness and fitness only. So I found that the conversations that I've been having are vastly different. And even though Wildsville Wellness still does a lot of fitness and nutrition, it's not only about that anymore. And the brand just it felt right. It felt like it was time to let go of TW Fitness and welcome in a new brand, which wasn't easy, wasn't an easy decision to make. And that's actually kind of going to direct some of the conversation tonight is when I had to actually let go of that, it had become a part of my identity. It was who people knew me as. It was, over 10 years of my life that I spent building that brand. So letting go was definitely not easy, but it was right. The timing was right. And interestingly enough, a number of people did ask me this week why I'm having a grand opening if I'm already open. And just from a business perspective, it's important for a business to have a grand opening so that you really kind of, shout it out from the rooftop that you're here. This is what we do. This is what we stand for. This is what we're about. And even though people have followed me for a long time or have followed the brand, the old brand, the new brand, or, or you could be new to the conversation. And what this really is just kind of really solidifying who we are and what we do and how we got here, and what our mission really is in the wellness world, because fitness is a very small part of what I do now, and nutrition is also a smaller part of what I do, but I still do those. They are still a part of the business. They will always be a part of the business, but the conversation has totally shifted in how we're approaching this. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about that. And that kind of starts with from TW to Wildsville Wellness. When I was branding TW Fitness, I was working as a full-time accountant in Nunavut. And it was interesting because I really didn't know what to name it. And I just kind of fell into the fitness industry and I absolutely loved it. And I really didn't know what to name it. So I remember sitting down with some people that I worked with and we chatted about what I should call it. And it was like, well, if we want to, we can do a play on TW. And if I, TW really stands for my name. So if I decide to rebrand that way, then we can. So that was kind of an easy fix for looking at what will I call myself when I go into the fitness industry. And why I got into the fitness industry really was because when I spent most of my life suffering from eating disorders and battling eating disorders. And I really did not like how I looked. I didn't like anything about it. I mean, I wouldn't go out because of how I looked. I wouldn't apply for certain jobs because of how I felt my image was. Looking back at some of the pictures, sure, in some pictures I was overweight, but, most of the time it was really a distorted image as opposed to, an actual problem. So, it really spoke to the volume of what was actually happening. So one of the things that ended up happening when we went from TW to Wildsville Wellness and that original, shifting from that original brand, is in 2003 and 4, living in the North, I packed on a bunch of weight. I was living with my boyfriend, who's now my husband, for the first time living with a boy, kind of, so to speak. And I was really, shifting my life to adjust to what he liked, the foods that he liked to eat and all of that stuff. So I went from pretty much vegetarian to eating meat and potatoes and gravy, that kind of thing. So I was really packing on the pounds, and I think I just came to this point in my life where, it was like every time I wanted to lose weight, I was going through the cycle of starvation. I was exhausted. I remember thinking, I'm 24 years old. I smoke over a pack of cigarettes a day. I can't. It's I've got to make some changes to my life. By this point, I've been battling with bouts and cycles of eating disorders like anorexia and bulimia for about a decade, maybe a little more if I'm really honest. So I just hit that point where I was I was so done. And when I say done, I'm sure you've had this feeling sometimes when you wake up in the morning and you're I'm done. I'm never doing that again. And that was kind of what happened. Is it was like, I don't know what changed. I have no idea. It was like I woke up in the morning and somebody had gone into my brain overnight and planted a new way of thinking into my head. And I just got up that morning and I remember sitting on my bed thinking like, I've got to change, man. Like I can't stay like this. So once I did that, it was it. I just shifted how I started to think. And I was like, okay, if I'm going to exercise every single day, then I've got to, be okay with this. Like I've got to start exercising for my body, for my health, and not for how it looks and what the number on the scale says. Like if I never lose another pound, I'm going to have to be okay with this. Like why am I going to give up the rest of my life, my happiness, my health, because I don't look a certain way, or I'm not wearing a certain pant size, or I'm not, weighing a certain amount on the scale. So it really became that I started to do this, that like healthy eating was really good for me. So I started to shift how I thought about exercise, and I started to shift how I thought about eating healthy. And I would write out mantras and I would repeat those over and over and over again. And I really did. It shifted. Everything in me started to shift, and I started to focus on getting faster, on getting better, on all of the changes that was actually happening. And before I even knew it, it was like, I started to look forward to the gym. I started to actually start looking up new recipes, like new meal plans. I was like buying magazines for like healthy cooking. And so I knew at that point that my life had shifted. But in reality, when I looked in the mirror and my clothes and stuff, I didn't really see a huge difference physically. So about 6 months or so into this, I was just kind of like, okay, I've got to make some adjustments to my nutrition that maybe there are things that I don't know about. So about 6 months in, when I really felt that my routine in terms of my fitness was done, then I really tackled the nutrition. I was reading a lot of magazines and books that were telling me like how to eat and things. And I remember thinking like, oh my God, this is so much food. Like I am going to be so overweight if I eat like this. But then I was like, listen, Tanya, it was like the pep talk every day. It was like, up and down every day. It was like, you've got to make some changes. Like nothing else that you've ever done has worked. Starving yourself hasn't gotten you where you wanted to go. And that you've promised yourself that this is about your health. So if all these people and all these magazines and all these books are saying they eat 6 times a day, and this is the kind of food they eat, like they can't all be lying. So at least give it a try. What have you got to lose? And as I started to shift and adjust and eat more food and start to really eat for the training that I was doing, 6 months after that, my clothes were falling off. I was wearing 2 sizes smaller, and I was just floored. And I was not even weighing myself. I was like, I could take my jeans off without unbuttoning them or unzipping them. And I was eating more food than I'd ever eaten in my entire life. And I was training, and I felt friggin' amazing, and I never got on the scale. So I finally did get on the scale, and I realized that I'd lost about 20 something pounds. Now at 4'11", 20 something pounds is a lot of weight. It's probably, if you're like 5'5" or above, that will probably be the equivalent of 40 odd pounds for you. So, think about that. Like when you kind of start to lose like 2 pant sizes, like that's a lot of weight, especially when you're not watching it. You're not looking at it. Like most of us go on a diet and we're just staring at that number on the scale, and that's how we measure our success. So yeah, I lost, quite a bit, but it wasn't like watching the pot boil, so to speak, like I had done every other time. Like I weighed myself consistently, constantly, like 5-6 times a day, sometimes weighing myself. So in this case, I just kind of realized that, man, nobody is telling us this stuff. It was like I stumbled upon the big secret of the fitness industry that nobody was telling people. It was like every time I went to look for weight loss, somebody was shoveling a supplement in my face. Every time I went to go look for something, I was being sold another diet plan, another quick fix, another something. And this was like, holy crap. Like I went out every Friday night with my husband, and I ate pasta at the restaurant. I had like a salad, pasta, a glass of wine, and we split a dessert. Like every Friday night I did that. Every Thursday night I ate a big bowl of popcorn with like popcorn spice on it, like after watching Grey's Anatomy on TV, like after the gym. And, my life was great. Like I was in wicked shape and things were working. So I knew inside of me that I wanted to teach this to other people. And basically that's what TW Fitness started to do. Was I wanted to teach this. And what it really is about is teaching people that when we shift how we think and view things, everything shifts and changes. So I hope that makes sense. If you have any questions, just pop them in the chat about anything. So really, Wild Soul Wellness from TW Fitness, we're just kind of getting into some of these conversations of when I originally started this work about 10 years ago. And that is kind of where we are, is that it was over this Wild Soul Wellness is really over a decade in the making. So what ended up happening was I really wanted to do this work, but I didn't know any other way to do it than fitness. And I was in great shape, and like I was, had lost all the weight, and people were coming up to me asking me to train them and coach them, and what was I doing? And I was teaching that. So I started a little side business. I was working at the gym, volunteering at the gym, and because that's how much I loved it. And I was having these conversations with people, and I built my business. Now, what ended up happening was that in late 2008, my husband and I moved from where we were living. We moved back to where we're from in Newfoundland, and things changed, life changed, and I went through an extreme period of stress. And in 2010, I had gained, about 10, 12 pounds, I guess. And it was the first time in over 5 years, in 6 years, that I gained any weight at all. So by this time, I was running a full-time fitness business. And I didn't really go into my approach about just kind of tackling what was going on because I didn't realize what was going on with me. So I decided to do a fitness competition to really get my routine kick-started and all of this stuff. That's what I convinced myself at the time. But it had gone from being about my health to about being about my body, the image, and being good enough. But I did not see that at the time. In my mind, it was like, no, I've always wanted to do a fitness competition. Like if I do a fitness competition, so I didn't realize that a shift had already happened subconsciously that I wasn't aware of that was actually happening. So I'm in the fitness industry. I'm coaching people. I'm loving it. People are getting amazing results, changing lives. But I did so in order to kickstart my own results, because I gained weight for the first time in over a decade, or in about 6 years, I decided to do a fitness competition. So basically, the long story short of that is that I ended up with eating disorders again. I was burnt out and I was unhealthy. I was doing it at a cost of my own health, and that I knew that I had to kind of take a walk. I had to walk away. So I'm running a full-time fitness business. The business is at this point in time, I mean, it was exploding. We had 2 locations, 6 staff. My stress level was through the roof. I was working 120-hour weeks. I was burned out. And because I had this image to uphold from, what my pictures look like and what really grew the business, because the business really exploded after I did the show. And what really started to happen there was that I went back on old coping skills, like not taking care of myself or over-exercising and then kind of under-eating and really restricting food. And that's kind of what happened. So I reached that point where I kind of looked around and I said, you know what, I can fix all this. I can do all this, but I'm doing it now at a cost of my health, not for my health. And if I'm not healthy and I'm not living authentically to what I'm teaching other people to do, then do I really have any right to be here teaching this? And I felt that I didn't. I felt that the best thing for me to do was walk away at that time. Now, I still continued to teach fitness, but not at the level and not at the scale that I was doing it. My number one focus became healing my body and my burnout and all of those things. And what I didn't realize at the time either, because there's so many blind spots and so many layers of this stuff, is that I didn't know that at the time that burnout was going to bring me here, which is, at the launch of Wild Soul Wellness, which is bringing me back to the roots of where I was. So what I actually started to realize was missing was I wanted to teach this stuff, but I didn't have the words or the training to actually teach this to people. So what I did for myself, I knew how to do it for me, but to articulate that into a coaching plan to actually teach my clients to do it was something that I was really struggling with. And so then I felt like, well, if I can't articulate it, then should I be teaching it? So I wasn't really teaching it anymore. And then, with 120-hour weeks, it was easy to just kind of forget about that. So the original purpose and the original plan of actually getting into the fitness industry was no longer what I was facing. But just because I didn't know it, just because I knew it didn't mean I could teach it. So just because I knew it for myself didn't mean that I could actually teach that to other people. And, that is one of the things that actually happens in the world a lot is people, kind of learn something for themselves and then they try to teach it. But the reason that you're not teaching it properly is because you haven't actually learned it fully yourself. And that's what I realized is that the burnout and everything else was about was so that I could learn what I didn't already know. Because I believe that the universe kind of lines us up to figure these things out. So for 3.5 years, I spent and dedicated myself to healing my mind and body. And I found the language that I was looking for, but I also went on an experience that I did not see coming at all. When I left and I sold, off a big part of my company, and I kind of scaled back and I really focused on my health. In my mind, I was like, this is a recharge. This is a reset. I want to get back to why I got into the fitness industry. But I didn't see, on the horizon what was about to transpire for me. And it was wild. It was definitely a wild experience. So what I discovered really ultimately is that why things work in the beginning. So I want to go back. So I changed my life, completely changed my life in 2004. I quit smoking, started going to the gym all the time, eating healthy. And that consistency lasted for about 6 years, 5 to 6 years. Almost nothing kept me from the gym. And nothing really took me off of my diet plan. Like I went out on Friday nights and I enjoyed myself and, enjoyed a glass of wine. I still had a very structured life, even though I still had a lot of balance in there as well. I ate carbs, I ate healthy, worked out all the time, and nothing really, really took me off my game. So the move ended up becoming insanely stressful. We were building a house. We were dealing with contractors. It was just, if you've built a house, like when I even think about it now, sometimes my stress level starts to rise because of what we actually went through. We were getting married at the same time. I had moved across the country. We had a very close death in the family, which led to a lot of other drama and a lot of other things that were going on. On top of that, we had gotten a dog, a little baby puppy, who was now the center of my world. So life had changed. And then on top of that, I was working full time, which I had a 30 to 45 minute drive each way for my work, and I'm running my business part time. So if you can imagine that the little amount of time that I had and that my stress level was on bust, enter no coping skills, no healthy coping skills. So everything that I have been doing was working until I entered a massive amount of stress. Now, anybody's going to go through that. We've all been there, right? Where we've had like major life changes. Like you could have been, whether it was married, maybe you had kids, or, like you lost a job and you had a kid. And there's sometimes it feels like, you can't get out from underneath all of the stuff that's happening. So what I kind of wanted to know was, why had I gone back on old coping skills? I very much had brand new healthy skills. Like I've been 6 years using fitness and exercise as a way to kind of really, tune into myself, what I wanted for self-confidence, to change my life, to change my body image, to change my battle with eating disorders. So it wasn't that I didn't have those coping skills. It's why in extreme stress did I go back on those? And one of the things that I realized is that my stress was very different where I lived before, because I didn't have any, certainly the type of connections that I had in the town was very transient. It was a very different kind of a lifestyle. So the type of stress that I was under was very different than the type of stress that I've been under now. And in this type of stress, I started trying to please everybody. I started doing what was best for everybody else. I was running my business and I was terrified that I'd made a mistake and that I was going to, lose everything if I wasn't there 24/7 for people. And then I was trying to be a good wife to my husband. I was trying to be a good dog mom, and I was trying to be a good daughter, trying to be a good daughter-in-law. And I was trying to do all of this stuff. And I think that most of you can definitely relate to that, because that's what we do a lot. And when I didn't feel that was working, or, I felt like I was coming up short all the time because it seemed like I had too many balls in the air and nothing seemed to be working out right. And it felt like there was always someone there to tell me, what I wasn't getting right. And my stress level started to go up. So what did I do is I went back to old subconscious patterns. So this was what I realized, is that when we change things by only using our mindset, but we don't really do that deep inner work that we need to figure out what those patterns were there for. So ultimately, when I changed my life, I completely changed my life, but I never actually went back and looked at, why did I have an eating disorder in the first place? What was the root of that? What was the triggers for my eating disorders? And what was the triggers for a lot of other things in my life? So when I reverted to those old behaviors, and when I decided that I needed to refocus on healing, I didn't only focus on healing from that perspective of getting my body and my mind back into a better place. I actually wanted to know what had happened. Like I became actually obsessed with finding the answer to that question, what happened? Because I wanted to know why we did what we did, because this was a common theme. It wasn't just for me that was showing up. Now mine was an extended period of time for 5 or 6 years, but we all know people who've done that, right? Like, they've changed their life. They've been fit. They've been going to the gym 3 or 4 years. And then boom, out of nowhere, like we run into them somewhere and they've gained all the weight. Maybe it was you, maybe you've done that, or you completely change your life. And a year, 2 years in, you go, well, this isn't working for me anymore, or whatever happens. And then the same thing. So this is a pattern that I was seeing in the gym. And I'm seeing it now within myself. And I wanted to know what was behind this, because there had to have been something behind this that I really wanted to know about, because it was a common theme everywhere. So I was seeing this pattern amongst everybody. including myself, and I really wanted to figure out what that was about. So that's where wellness from the inside out came from. It was, sometimes for people, it's like a major life change, like what happened to me, and you have no coping skills, so you rely on the old unhealthy coping skills, or it's triggers from old traumas that you weren't even aware of or that hadn't been dealt with. It was from looking for something. Sometimes we're actually trying to meet our needs in a way, like we have needs for certainty, significance, love and connection, variety. So when we're trying to meet our needs, a lot of the times what ends up happening is that we join a program and we're getting those needs met on some level, or we're no longer getting our needs met because our old coping skills were what was meeting our needs. Now we've tried to change things and we're not getting our needs met in the same way, but we don't realize that that's what we're after because we've never had those conversations. So there's a number of different ways that we can actually do it. But most of the time, what I figured out for myself and for many other people, after spending a decade of helping people lose weight, realize that most people, when we go out to lose weight, we're looking for a feeling. There's something that we want from it. Losing the weight will give us something. So as an example, if you're certainty driven, and then most people who are very certainty driven love routine. They hate change. They like to eat the same. They like to do all the same things. They like to be on time. Everything needs to be scheduled. And they're very certainty driven. So if you start to change your routine and you start to go to the gym and you start to change your food, then what ends up happening is that triggers start to come up for you. You don't like change. You don't like any of those things. So now you can't do the new thing, even though that's what you want, because you're pulled back into the old things. Does that make sense? Give me some feedback if you think that kind of makes sense, if you're following along with the conversation that we're having now. So when we look at with this wellness from the inside out, it's when we start to think about what these coping skills actually mean for us. We're looking at what's driving us. What's this feeling that we're trying to get? And when we go after this feeling and we don't get it, then a lot of the times we'll quit and revert. Or we don't realize that the feelings that are coming up for us are because we have old coping skills that are not in alignment with what we want. So that's the wellness from the inside out, which really is what triggers us into conflict. So how many times have you actually said, I really want to lose weight, but then you don't do anything to do it? And you really do want to lose the weight, but yet you can't seem to get a routine in place. You can't seem to eat healthy consistently. You can't seem to show up to the gym, on a consistent basis. So on one way, you're saying, I want this, and you really do want it. But on another way, you're in a constant conflict where you can't seem to find the time, the energy, the money, or anything to do it. Has that ever happened to you? For most of us, it definitely has. So the wellness from the inside out piece really comes from tapping into what's happening inside of us. And what our basic human needs are is really what's driving us. There are emotional needs, not, worrying about our basic human needs, like where am I sleeping tonight, or where's my next meal coming from, or my next paycheck. While those are very real for many people, for most people, in the world that we live in, this is not something that most people are dealing with. Most people do know where their next meal is coming from, or at least they know where to go get food, or, things like that. But for many people, we are now dealing with an emotional fallout of emotional things that we're looking to meet those needs for. And when we don't know what's driving us, we don't understand that this is why we're often in conflict all the time. So Wild Zone Wellness is really about tapping into what's happening inside of you so that you can change the patterns and the habits that you have. What most people don't know is that our subconscious runs the show 96% of the time. So how many times have you gotten to work and realized, my God, I don't even remember how I got here? That's autopilot. And that is what we're mostly on all the time. So you might say, today, that's it. I'm changing my life. I'm going on a diet. I'm eating healthy. I'm going to the gym every single day, and nothing's going to get in my way. And then the next day you're back into your old patterns and you go, I don't even know what happened. I looked up and all of a sudden I, forgot my lunch. And so what ends up happening is that the subconscious is running the show, and it's sabotaging us a lot because it is relying on those old behaviors and those old patterns to meet the needs that you're trying to meet. So in order to change your habits permanently, you need to know what's actually driving you. So we need to look at what are the top needs and how you're currently meeting those needs, so then we can change them. So wellness from the inside out focuses on what's inside of you that isn't being met in a healthy way and helps you repattern and change it. So if you think about this from a certainty perspective, if you're certainty driven and you're all about comfort, you love to be comfortable if you're certainty driven. Now, if you're certainty driven and you go home every day after work and you lie on the couch and you watch TV, and then most nights you have some treats, some chocolate or some chips or things like that. Now, when you take that away, what's going to happen is that you're going to start feeling very uncomfortable. And if you don't like to be uncomfortable, then you're very quickly going to want to go back and get those chips and get back on the couch. That is a pattern. So what we look at is, well, what is your need for certainty? So then you're meeting your need for certainty in an unhealthy way by eating junk food and lying on the couch, which is not in line with what you say you want. Which what you say you want is, well, I want to be healthy and I want to be in shape and I want to lose some weight. Or for some people, it's not about weight. It's just about, I want to be healthy. Like, so it doesn't matter if you're overweight or not. If you're lying on the couch every night eating chips, it doesn't mean that you're healthy just because you might not actually need to actually lose weight. So when we figure out what's driving you, that is when we have a chance to change it. So if you're certainty driven, then we can look at the behaviors and the patterns that you're doing that are keeping you comfortable. Then, we all have those 6 basic human needs. So we have all of them that we're meeting in varying ways. But there's usually a couple of the top 2 or 3 that are really going to tell us what's driving us. So we look at those behaviors and those patterns and we go, okay, well, you say that you're really focused on health, but you are very certainty driven. And so you're meeting your need for certainty by sitting on the couch eating chips, because you know that when you do that, you're going to feel better. You're going to feel all warm and cozy, at least temporarily. But it's an unhealthy way to meet your need. So then you live in this cycle of suffering because you go, well, I said I want to lose weight, but I'm lazy. I can't get off the couch. I love chips. And so you stay in this cycle of the figure 8 where you go, I want to do this, but then you don't do it and you sabotage yourself. And then you hate on yourself, and then you feel guilty for hating on yourself. And then that doesn't feel good. And so we go through these big cycles of what I call the figure 8. So in order to change that, we have to actually figure out, okay, what are those chips? What way are they meeting those needs, and how can we meet your need for certainty in a healthier way? So then we start to reframe things, and that's where we start to get in and do some of that deeper work. Now, I know that this might sound a little bit confusing, but I think it's pretty straightforward that we're kind of tapping into some of this stuff. It is a bit of work though to do it, and you have to be open to doing that work. So what we're looking for really is, what are these behaviors doing? Now, on the other hand, you could be lying on the couch eating chips every night and be very variety driven. So if you have a need for variety, like if you love change, you love surprises, you love excitement, you love all of that kind of stuff, and you're living in a life where, you're working a Monday to Friday, 9 to 5 job, and you drive home every day, and you and your husband or your partner or your kids, you kind of, the supper happens, baths happen, the homework happens, and then you sit in front of the TV and you watch TV. And how do you get variety? Well, your needs for excitement are not being met, and your needs for variety are not being met in the absolute routine of your life. So how do you meet your need for variety? Well, you can go and get chips, and then you can turn on like an action movie or something like that. So you get lost in the variety, the suspense of what's happening on TV, and you eat chips. And it might seem simple, but it changes your state in the moment. So you're getting variety from the mundane of what's going on in life. So this is another way that we can still use food to meet our need. So there's all kinds of varying ways, and what the work that I do allows us to really tap in to each person individually. And we have testing, and we have all these kinds of things that we can actually do to figure out what is actually meeting your need. What are your top driving forces, and how are you meeting those needs? What behaviors you're using, what patterns you're using. And then when we know if you're let's say that you're certainty driven, then right now you're using no exercise, watching TV, and eating chips to meet your need for certainty. Well, in order for us to change that, we have to take that away, but we also have to put something back in there that's going to meet your need for certainty. And a lot of the times, just knowing that your need for certainty, so we can actually give you new coping skills. And then it takes time, a constant integration, and a constant implementation of those new coping skills in order for you to repattern the subconscious mind to automatically go to the new coping skill. So that's essentially how it works. Repetition becomes the mother of skill. Repetition becomes the mother of skill. Repetition becomes the mother of skill. So if you're sitting in front of the TV every single day, now all of a sudden 9 o'clock at night, you want to watch TV and you want to veg out, because that has become your routine and your habit. So in order for us to make that change and that shift permanently, we need to replace that habit with something else, but you need that coaching, and you need the assistance, and you need that conscious mind to be on top of that until that new pattern and habit forms, so that it becomes every time you want to lie on the couch and watch TV, you go, okay, that's just my need for certainty. What else do I need to do? And that is how we create really ultimately permanent change from that, is by looking at your very blueprint of life and what it is that's going on within your life, and looking at who you really are on the inside, dealing with anything that's been left undealt with, and allowing you to tap into who you really are to meet the needs that you need. So some of the times we'll find that these are behaviors and things that we don't want to face. And if you want to know what something is covering up for you, then stop doing it. So for me, when I wanted to know what smoking was covering up for me, I had to quit smoking. And instead of flipping out and going and eating when I stopped smoking, what I had to do was I had to sit in the uncomfortableness of not going for that cigarette. I had to feel the craving. I had to feel the anger that bubbled up inside. I had to actually look at what is this all about? And then I had to start allowing myself to feel what it was that smoking was constantly pushing back down. And that's the same thing if you binge eat, if you use food as a way to cope with stress and anxiety, then one of the things that you'll notice is that if you want to figure out what that behavior is doing for you, then we stop doing that behavior. So this is how I coach a lot of my clients into this, is that we look at the patterns and the behaviors and then we remove them. And that is not fun. Like, there's nothing fun about it unless you're variety driven. And I'm variety driven, so I do find it entertaining at times for myself. But if you're variety driven, you might find it entertaining, and it might actually start to meet your need. But what ends up happening is that really we start to withdraw because we don't want to face the things. I mean, there's a reason that we started to cover some of these things up with food and with coping skills. And a lot of the times we just haven't been taught these skills. So that was what I really figured out, what was actually missing from the conversation, and how I didn't know how to articulate this when I first came in and I first changed my life. I did a lot of this stuff energetically, system-wise, but I didn't have a conversation to put to it. I didn't know a language for it. So by going off and kind of falling completely off the wagon, or I wouldn't say completely off because I still exercised and I still ate really well, but I had no consistency, and I was all over the place, and I was not healthy certainly I wasn't healthy of my mind because or my body, because I was overworking and I was stressed out all the time. And so even if you're eating right and taking care of your body, but you're living in constant and exhaustive stress, you can't really sit down and say, well, I'm healthy. So for me, that was the realization as well, is that I wasn't really healthy, even though physically, you would have looked at me and said, well, I looked fine. But emotionally and mentally, I definitely wasn't healthy. And physically, I wasn't healthy because my body was under massive amounts of stress. So that was a big part of what I realized, is that when I went on this new journey, it was a part of learning the conversation and learning it at a very deep level. And learning that, we can brush over and we can keep brushing over things, or we can actually go in and figure out what's actually been in the way. So the wellness from the inside out is about looking inside to fix the issues that arise for us, that show up. It's giving you new coping skills that work even when life gets hard and stressful. So now, when things get crazy for me now, I've redeveloped a whole new pattern. And this is about now. So if somebody, I'll use an example of, let's just say that in the past with my job, if a client was upset with me and maybe wanted, me to change my schedule, and maybe I only had Friday night to maybe see my husband, and my client was kind of like, well, I'm going to miss my workout, or, is there no way that you can accommodate? I would have accommodated my client, gave up my only night off. Then I would have been resentful and a bit bitter about doing that. And then I wouldn't have seen my husband. I would have put his needs and my needs last, in doing those things. Now I have a schedule for the most part. I mean, I will do some level of adjusting, but my life is also important to me, and I no longer meet my needs through trying to people please people. So that put a much healthier need in place. Additionally, anytime I feel the need to restrict my food or eat or smoke or do any of those things, because some of those, those triggers still arise. It's not that they've always gone away. The bulk of them are gone, and most times I go months sometimes without feeling any of those needs. But when life starts to get hectic and stressful, and it feels like you're being pulled in every direction. One of the things that I've learned to do is kind of, the way I used to deal with things was that when I was too busy, people would say, well, you just need to take a little breather and figure things out. And I'd be like, if I had time for a friggin' breather, I wouldn't be in this situation right now. I've taken time off is not my answer when I got 50 million things to do. That would be my old answer. Now my answer is, I got to go sit down for 5 minutes. I'm going to take a couple of deep breaths. I'm going to realign with what's going on with me and figure out what's going to be possible. What's the most important stuff that I really need to do? And I don't base my most important stuff anymore on, what's the most important thing in my business. It's also looking at my life balance. Well, is there something going on within my personal life that I really need to be paying attention to? I need to be at, or I really want to be at, as opposed to even need to be there, in satisfying that need for love and connection that we all have. and then I remap it out. And what I found is that doing that coping skill that only takes me 5 or 10 minutes, it ends up saving me a world of time because I can learn to prioritize better. So my coping skills have gotten stronger by doing this work and by going through the things that I didn't think that I was going to be able to go through, and dealing with some of the traumas that I've had in my life, and dealing with some of, all of the things that we have, and looking at all of the bad habits that I had and what needs they were meeting, and then mapping out new things. So by putting those coping skills in place and consistently showing up and using new coping skills every single day, like, life is pretty intense. Like, in the next 2 months, life is really crazy. Like, I travel for 10 days in a couple of weeks, and then I get back, and then I go into a 3-week blitz of promos with a company in the US, who is doing, we're doing like brand awareness and things like that. So, like, there's not a lot of breathing room, but funny enough, every single day I make time for my fitness. I make time for yoga. I make time for fun. I make time for laughing. I make time for the things that are extremely important. In the past, I only made time for work. So 18 hours a day, 20 hours a day sometimes, which was only work, and there was no room for anything else. Now, even though things get busy, I never allow them to get too busy, because I have a completely different approach. And even when things get what I would say is above normal busy, I have all new coping skills to look at it. And I'll go, okay, I'm going to get through this week, but next week I have to put some better parameters on, or I have to force myself to take 2 days off, so that I'm recovering that balance. And that is what looking at our coping skills really starts to become, is that once we've done the work and we figure out what our old coping skills we're replacing and meeting our needs, now we're in a position where we can put new coping skills in place. And when we consistently do them, and I know in the beginning, when you're new to this conversation, it sometimes seems like, no, that's not possible. But I can guarantee you that when we put those new coping skills in place and you consistently show up for yourself, that it becomes a very different conversation. And it's not always easy to face the things that we don't want to face. But that's where the freedom really lies. The freedom from weight, the freedom from, the self-hate that we do, the freedom from not feeling good enough, the freedom from always feeling like we're overwhelmed and overstressed and all of this stuff. It's like the saying, one of my favorite sayings is that you got to feel it to heal it. And a lot of the times what ends up happening is that most of us have learned to shut everything down and we go into survival mode. And those skills that sometimes in our lives were necessary, we really needed those. But then they turn on us when we can't deal with even the smallest of things, and any little thing sends you off, over the edge, and any little detail, and then you're gone, to eat half a tub of ice cream or smoke half a pack of cigarettes or check completely out of life and not get anything done. And that is when those survival skills really turn on us, and they become, basically they change. They turn on us, essentially. They're no longer working the way that they have once worked for us. So the Wild Soul Wellness was born out of this journey. And basically, I did all of this work. I took a look at what it drove me, what inspired me, what motivated me. And I ended up back at the very beginning of my own journey back in 2003, 2004. There was a lot of dark days on this path, because most of the time we are facing and going through things that are not comfortable. It's not comfortable when you lived your life a certain way and you've become the person that people expect to behave a certain way, that people can treat you a certain way, that you're always the one that kind of seems like you're give, but you're not always getting very much, and you don't even take the time to take care of your own body, your own health. And when we start to see those patterns emerge, when we start to face that stuff, it becomes really easy to want to quit, to run away. And there are dark days, but it's the days that we don't quit. And it's the days that we show up for ourselves, that we actually go through it and we get those answers, and then we grow through that. And growth is not always easy, especially when we're changing our lives. So Wild Soul Wellness was really born from that concept of the wild soul, that there's something inside of us that for most of us that's actually trying to get out, that we've been covering up with food and cigarettes and pleasing everybody else and doing what we're supposed to do and living a life that we should, that we're not getting, any kind of joy out of anymore. So, we've taken a job just to survive. We've taken a job just to pay the bill. We stopped doing our passion because someone told us that it wasn't possible. We don't take care of ourselves because we're trying to meet our needs for love and connection by trying to be, the A+ mother and the A+ wife and the A+ this and the A+ employee, because we don't realize that we're trying to meet our need for significance. And we're meeting it in an unhealthy way when we can't even take 10, 30 minutes a day to take care of our health. So that is when we're doing, it's not about not doing things for other people, but it's about when we're doing them to get something as opposed to give something, then we're completely out of alignment. And the wild soul is about tapping into who we really are and doing it for the right reasons. But we have to get rid of a lot of surface stuff and a lot of those layers off of the top, what I call the shitty first draft, which I've adapted from Brené Brown, which is the SFD, which I refer to when I take my clients through that whole process where, all of this surface stuff that gets in the way, we kind of we gotta work our way through all of that stuff so that we can get to the deeper stuff underneath. And I wrote this article. It was I was coming out of my darkest days because, as I started to take the Band-Aids off of a lot of things in my life that I had not actually dealt with, things got pretty, it was like taking all the Band-Aids off at once and the wounds were bleeding and it didn't feel very good. And I was down for a few months. Like I was just not myself. I wasn't working out. I wasn't eating healthy. I wasn't taking care of myself. And I remember I started to feel better and I started to show up to the gym again. And I was like, okay, like I've got to get my life back together. And the first step for me getting my life back together is starting to take care of myself, my health. And I sat out one night and I just wrote, and I writing is something that has helped me throughout my life. And I wrote, basically the phrase that I'm a wild soul woman and I'm not here to fit a mold. I'm here to break the mold. And the concept of wild soul wellness was born from that. And that was when I realized that this was my true life purpose, was about wild soul wellness, was from about tapping into the inside, dealing with the stuff that many of us have not dealt with. And this is why we're all over the place. This is why we're up and down, whether you're overweight or you're not, whether you're underweight, whether you have eating disorders, whether you have bulimia or anorexia or any of those things. Most of the time it's because we're not dealing with the things that have happened to us in our life or that are showing up for us in life. We haven't done that inside work, and we keep going to the next diet and to the next plan, and we keep berating ourselves and we keep being down on ourselves because we think if we can fix the weight that we'll fix all the problems. But when we fix the weight, a lot of the times we still haven't fixed anything, and that's why we keep cycling and reverting back to things. So wild soul wellness really represents a willingness to look inside, to fix the problem at its root, and to stop band-aiding stuff so that when you fix the problem at its root, you end up fixing it permanently. And that's where our name came from, which is what I promised to talk about on this call. Now, why do we struggle? We struggle in life because of the conflicts that we have inside, which is what I alluded to earlier when I said we have these, basically these ways of doing things. So I say I want to be fit and I want to be healthy, but then I don't exercise and I lie on the couch and I eat chips all night. So that is a conflict, and that you are not alone in that conflict. You are not a failure. You are not lazy. You are not any of those things. You might be showing up that way, but that is not who you are. So when we look at these conflicts, that is how we end our suffering. So we feel like we're in suffering and that we're in a struggle constantly. Suffering is only necessary until we realize it's not. I love that. When I first heard that, somebody asked me, do you think that suffering is necessary? And I said, well, I think that there's always some level of suffering. And then when they said, well, suffering is only necessary until you realize it's not, I didn't understand it then, but months later I understood it as I started to realize that I could remap. If I dealt with what was showing up for me and I moved through it, then I could reframe it and then suffering ended, in a healthier way. So it made total sense then. So if you're in a job, let's use this as an example. If you're in a job that you absolutely hate, but you have bills to pay and a family to pay for, but the job is like totally sucking the life out of you, you likely have suffering. Like you get up every morning and you don't want to go to work, and it impacts who you're showing up for, as to your family, to your friends, to everyone. You become absorbed about how much you hate that job, and it starts to take on a life of its own. And then the next thing you know, it sucked the life entirely out of you and you don't know who you are anymore. So you don't care about the gym. You don't care about your health. You probably smoke to cope with your stress. You eat and stuff your face, and you sing your Facebook and to deal with all of your unhappiness, so that you're getting these temporary quick fixes on everything outside of you. So you're meeting those needs in unhealthy ways. And how we end that suffering is a willingness to change how you view something. So if it is your job, I see this. Oh, okay. I'm going to answer that very shortly. So basically, I'm just going to pop it. So when we have a willingness to change things, so what ended up happening was, if you view your job, so you might not be able to quit your job right now. I mean, I'm not suggesting that everybody quit their job and go out and like chase your passion, because it's not always a realistic option. I mean, you have bills to pay, mortgage to pay, kids to feed, all kinds of different things like that. But what we can start to change is how you view your job. A willingness to look at what changes do need to be made in your life. Like maybe you need a hobby that gives you excitement. Maybe you have a passion that right now can't be turned into a financial income for you, but you could go do that outside of your working hours so that it really gives you some zest for life again. Maybe you need some of that excitement. Maybe you need to get some other skills, go back to school or find some volunteer work so that eventually you can build up so that you have a long-term plan to get out of that job. Or, things like that. But why we suffer a lot of the times is because we can't see a solution. So we're stuck and we can't see a solution. So we get out of suffering by choosing to look at it and become solution-based. So we suffer only when we focus on the problem. And we get out of suffering by facing the issues and working on them, not avoiding them and deciding that this is just the way it is. So if I have this job and I'm working, back like when I worked in accounting, and I'm working in accounting, and I go, actually I'll use TW Fitness as a great example, because 3.5 years ago, I decided to walk away from it. And I had spent, 6 years, 7 years building that business. This was my life. I invested heavily into it. I was going to lose a lot of money by selling out and walking away. So I could have actually just sat there and said, oh, well, this is the bet I made. And people did tell me that. That's it. You made your bed. You're going to have to lie in it. You're going to have to find a way out of this. And you know what? My way out was take financial loss and figure out another way to recover it, because I knew that I just couldn't keep going the way I was going. That was what was right for me. I'm not suggesting that that's right for everybody, but I could have chose a very different way, and I could be 3.5 years in. I could be, medicated. I could have been suicidal. I could have been, I could have actually gone any of those routes, because when you're dealing with that level of unhappiness and anxiety and frustration every single day, those become very real possibilities for people. So when we decide that we're going to be solution-based, and we go and we look at this and say, I have to have a solution. There is going to be a solution to this, and I have to find it. But when we become only focused on the problem, then we don't see an end to our suffering, and our suffering ensues and it stays. But when we go, okay, right now I can't see a problem, but I'm going to go talk to my friends, and I'm going to make sure that they know I'm solution-based. I'm not just here to vent. I want to actually find a solution. So I'm going to answer a question that came in privately. And basically, what happened was, weren't you afraid of hitting rock bottom and not being able to get out of it when you had to deal with everything? Absolutely. I 100% absolutely. And I think that any coach or anybody that's going to tell you any different is, I'll just leave it at that. Nobody really told me what I was in for, I guess, when I I wrote an article last week on my Tanya Uncensored blog, which was tearing the house down. When the house comes down, it hurts. And what reference I'm going to use is, when we build a house, the house that we live in, behind the house, the image that we put out there to people, because we all wear masks. And we put out what we think people will like. We've learned at a very young age how to present ourselves to the world in a way that, will like us. And so we become accommodating. And what ends up happening is that we hide who we really are behind walls and behind masks and everything, because we think we're not going to be liked. And then if we have any issues of being bullied, or, being told certain things about ourselves, like you're not good enough, you're not smart enough, you're not pretty enough. If we've been, at the existence of some of those things, not only do we have our own voice in our head, but we have other people's repeating those to us as well. So every single time something happens to us, now those are some of the basic things. Now throw in any kind of abuse, physical abuse, growing up in an alcoholic home, growing up in trauma, being in a car accident, experiencing any kind of death, or walking in or being involved in any kind of a traumatic situation. And it can be varying. Like, I experienced major trauma when I fell overboard in the middle of the night. And to all intents and purposes, to a lot of people, it was nothing. But to me, it was very traumatic in the moment. Like, I didn't know if I was going to be okay. And I really felt for a long time after that, I felt like nothing was the same. And, and there was a massive amount of fear that happened in that moment. And I got really stuck in life for a while. And so it doesn't have to be something that is like, being physically abused or sexually abused or being raped or there is a million things that so many people have gone through and so many people have suffered, that the small things every day of being told you're not pretty enough, or you're not good enough, or that you're too fat, or that you're too this, or you're too that, or, we need to change. Those sometimes are some of the small things. And then we have all the big things. So every single time that something happens to us and we hide behind it, so we withdraw ourselves, and that we start to change the way we look, change the way we talk, change the way we do things, change the way we associate with life. Many of us withdraw entirely into a completely different person and into a completely different shell, so that we, what we're presenting to the world is nothing like who we really are. And we become completely detached from who we really are, so that we don't know that anymore. So when I started to do this work, what ended up happening was, absolutely, like, I was kind of taken brick by brick, like piece by piece down, and kind of looking behind it. And as the issues approached, instead of running away from them, I started to deal with them. And that was why, I say last year, I guess, over a year ago, when I really hit bottom, it was definitely tough. It was one of the darkest times of my life. And I wrote the Wild Soul Woman article after that period of time, when I decided that I was going to get better, that it was time to get back up. And as I got back up, I had, I put all new coping skills into place for me to actually deal with that. And a part of that was stepping up and saying what worked for me and what didn't work for me, showing people who I really was, the interests that I really have, and allowing myself to be myself, and realizing that if people don't like me or don't see me that way, but then you go through that anxiety. And so you continually work through it. But when I hit rock bottom, that was definitely a very real concern, was that I'm not going to ever be okay again. But I surrounded myself with a very powerful team of people who I wasn't going through it alone. I had coaches, and I worked with healers, and, varying levels of people. And I even, kept my doctor in the loop about what was going on. So I worked with a variety of people. So, I guess to answer that question as best as I can is that, it's always the darkest before the dawn. It's always going to be, there's going to be the dark night of the soul. And I think that when you grow through that, it will, as you start to take all the layers down, when you tear down all the walls in the house that you built to protect yourself, it is going to hurt, because as you tear that down and as you rebuild, you have to feel everything that you refused to feel when you first put that up. So if you're building a house because you've experienced all kinds of things in your life, then and now you're not actually feeling them, as you take down each one of those pieces, you're going to start to feel those things. And you have to have the right team of people who can help you process those feelings. And when most of us in life have stopped feeling a long time ago. We nobody taught us how to properly feel and how to feel our way through things. And so all of those experiences get stuck in our body, and they get stuck. But what I can say is that even though it was tough and it was the most painful thing I've ever gone through in my entire life, it's also the most rewarding thing. It is about realizing that you don't have to do it alone, and that you definitely shouldn't do this work alone, whether it's in a formal counseling environment, a therapy environment, group therapy, whether it's coaches or healers, or however you do the work. It is making sure that you have a very supportive team in order for you to do that this work isn't meant for you to be alone. And this is a lot of what my writing has been about over the last year and a half, as I really stepped back up into who I really am, and kind of started to take on that real persona of who Tanya really is, not who the world told me to be. And a lot of my writing has been about my own journey about that. So, Tanya Uncensored, if you haven't gone and read some of those blogs, it is really good to do. And I also really recommend Brené Brown's work as well on Daring Greatly and Rising Strong. Some powerful work that she's written about that really puts things into common sense perspective about, why we do the things that we do, and how we avoid vulnerability, and how we can actually start to process some of those things. So I hope that answers your question. Is that definitely, I was afraid of hitting rock bottom. I was afraid I was never going to be okay again. And when I did hit rock bottom, people think you hit rock bottom, and I thought that I hit rock bottom several times. But when I hit rock bottom, I knew it. When my knees hit the ground, I didn't get up for months. Like, it wasn't like, and I wrote an article about it. It's called My Date with Destiny. And the article that I wrote that was published a couple of weeks ago in the Elephant Journal was about that exact experience, about hitting rock bottom and afraid that I was never going to be okay again. And in reality, what I realized is that, hitting rock bottom allowed me to rebuild my life in a way that suited me, that was right for me, that fit me. And, looking back now, there was nothing else that I could do, because I couldn't keep living the way I was living. I was miserable, and I was so unhappy, and I was unhealthy. And there was no way that I could keep living that. So going through the pain was really the only option that I had. So I hope that answers your question. And, I'm always free for a conversation or anything. If you're going through a really difficult time, I can at least, guide you and direct you into what might be, the appropriate course of action for you to take. Because I think the biggest thing is that I learned from my experience, and this was in my article in the Elephant Journal. If you haven't read it, you can find it online on the Elephant Journal. When my knees hit the ground, you can just search for my name on there and you'll find it. But I think the most powerful thing that I realized in that conversation was I'd done everything my entire life alone. Like, I wanted to prove to everybody I didn't need anybody, and that I was strong, and that I was independent, and that, I didn't need anybody, and frig everybody. And, I was giving the royal flip off to the world. And the whole purpose of all of this was actually realizing that that's what we're here for. And that's why I host Wild Soul Women retreats is because it's bringing that group of women together to help each other through this kind of work, because we're not meant to do this alone. And so many of us hide behind it. And even people who are going through depression or anxiety, and even if they've been medicated and things like that, nobody's talking about the real things. And, a big part of this work about Wild Soul Wellness is about facing the truth. And it doesn't mean that you walk around with a banner, that you have to write a, big blog post on Facebook every single day telling everybody all of your details, but that you do have those couple of people that are in your corner that have earned the right to hear your shame stories, that have earned the right to hear all of your stories, who've earned the right to hear your truth, who aren't going to judge you. Because if you're sharing your story with someone who you feel is going to judge you, well, then that's only going to compound the problem. So it's about finding those right people, that right network, so that they can help you end your suffering. So, that is a very good question. And I really thank you for asking that, because it helps everybody, not just, you. It helps a lot of people actually realize that, because it is a very real fear that a lot of people have, is like, holy crap, I can't deal with that stuff. If I go back and deal with any of that stuff, like, I'm never going to be okay again. And you think that you found a way to cope. And on some level, you found a way to survive, but I wouldn't call it coping, and I wouldn't call it a quality of life, if we're going to be really honest. And that was where I was. Not necessarily where you are, but most of us get there, where the truth is that we are hiding behind a wall of insecurities and trying to hide who we really are. And we call it coping, but we're surviving at best. We're getting up every day and we're showing up somehow, but we don't have a quality of life when we're hiding, who we really are. So and this becomes how we end dieting forever and how we end suffering forever. So the Wild Soul Wellness mission really has become about ending dieting forever. And what dieting to me shows people is there's a big insecurity. I'm having a lot of conversations with people. The conversation starts with, hey, Tanya, can you help me lose weight? And I say, well, what do you think is going on? And so they'll tell me, well, if I knew what to eat, I'd be able to lose weight. And I go, well, do you really not know what to eat? Because we go there, right? We go, I don't know what to exercise. If I knew what to do at the gym, I'd do it. If I knew what to eat, I would do it. And the truth is for most of us, you can find that stuff on Google. And most of us know that an apple is better than a bag of chips. We also know stir fry is better than, a burger and fries, but we don't always make the right choice. So the question becomes is not, do we know what's right for us? It becomes, why aren't we doing it when we actually do have the resources, the tools, and the skills most of the time to do it? And yes, there is a logical thing. If you've never lifted weights before and you've never worked out before, you should hire a coach or a trainer to actually learn how to properly do that. If you don't know how to eat healthy, then yes, you hire a dietitian. But most of the people who are doing this, it's not that they have never done that work before. It's that they've actually paid for numerous programs over the years that have never stuck to any of it. And the best plans in the world aren't going to work if there is some layers of stuff that's going on inside of you that you haven't dealt with. And that's really becomes down to it. Like, dieting is suffering. Most people who are on a diet are suffering. And the diet industry is a multi-billion-dollar industry, yet we still have an obesity issue. So resources and solutions isn't the problem. So then I question, what is the problem? And that is what Wild Soul Wellness is here to represent, is that I believe it's because we're focused on the outside and not the inside. I believe that the end of dieting has changed how we approach fitness and nutrition, but also about how we change how we view ourselves and how we go through the things that we need to go through. Because when you deal with all of the things and all of the blocks that you have to health and showing up for yourself, because of all this noise that's going on inside of you, when all of that's gone, it becomes really easy to show up and exercise, and it becomes really easy to eat well and take care of yourself. So fitness is something that you do to take care of yourself. So the question is, why don't you want to take care of yourself? As opposed to, and people go, well, it's time, but we show up for what's important to us. And most of the time, when we're really honest, time is never an issue, because we do all kinds of things that we're distracting from. So why are we distracting? So this is how we get to the root of what's really going on with us. And that's how we end dieting forever, is by actually looking at what's going on inside of us. So our approach needs to be based on eating to sustain a healthy life, and fitness is something to do to take care of ourselves. And it's not about the weight. The weight is oftentimes a manifestation of the problem. Or if weight is not an issue for you, then a lot of the times what you'll start to find out is that, because weight is never usually the only issue. I mean, I deal with tons of people who don't actually have a weight problem, but they're covering up this vicious figure eight cycle that they're stuck in, where it's like, well, I really want to be healthy, but I just don't make time for the gym. And I don't, I'm so busy. I don't have the money. I don't have, I don't know what to do. And we stay in these cycles. And that, how we get out of the dieting forever is by recognizing that what to eat and what to do isn't really the problem, that those are rewards. Those are really rewards of taking care of our life and taking care of our body. And that comes from an actual desire to want to take care of our health. So the question becomes not why aren't we eating healthy and why aren't we exercising? It becomes, why don't we want to take care of our health and our body in that way? And that is how we're going to get to ending dieting. And that is what Wild Soul Wellness mission is actually. So we end dieting by deciding to that we want health over numbers on the scale. We find out what the number on the scale or the pants really means to us, because when I talk to people, like, it's like, well, I'm 135 pounds and I really want to be 125, and they're wearing, and I'm like, okay, so if you get to a size, maybe somebody's like, okay, well, I'll get you to a size 4. Would you be happy with that? They'll say yes. They get to a size 4. They're 130 pounds. They're having a meltdown because they're not at 125, because the number in their head about what 125 looks like and what 125 means is the number means something about them. So the number on the pants and the number on the scale really becomes a bigger conversation that needs to happen within the dieting industry in order for us to end dieting forever. What does the scale number mean about you? What does it mean to you, and what does it mean about you? What does that mean about you? So when we change that conversation and then we start to reframe it, so once we get underneath what that number actually means about you and we change that conversation, then we have the chance to figure out what need you're meeting and how we can actually show up and change that need. And then we reframe it and give you new action to take to consistently show up for yourself. And that is how we end dieting. We stop looking outside for the answers and start looking inside to find the conflicts that we have against it. So you eat for health, to be consistent. And when you can't do those things and you're not showing up for yourself, to look at why you're not showing up, instead of saying, oh, I'm fat and I'm lazy and I'll never get it, and this is how it always been, and my mother was overweight, and we go into these big cycles, so I'm going to be overweight, and we go into all of those things instead of actually quieting ourselves and actually just looking at the real reason of why. So the work is not to look for fitness and weight loss, but to look within and find all the blocks that you actually have against fitness and weight loss and health and wellness. And that becomes where our real work really is. So I could take a breath now, have a sip of my tea. And if you have some questions, you can pop them in the chat box, or you can message me privately, because there is a group chat, or you can message me privately if you'd like. And then I'm going to tell you all about how I shook my mindset and how I've changed my life using that. Oh, I got to see this. Aha moment, hitting rock bottom is the best thing to happen to someone, because the old house, complex suffering, has crumbled, and you can start from the bottom to rebuild a new, stronger, different, grounded, satisfying, fulfilling life. You try to patch up the old wounds, fix one of the rooms up while the others are still a disaster. It can't be fixed. Out with the old and start building the new. That is so awesome, Linda. Thank you so much for saying that, because that is, I couldn't have said it better than what you just recapped that as, is that basically that is what we keep doing. It's like having a house that's falling apart and you just keep repainting it on the outside, and you keep thinking that that's going to fix everything. But then every year it rots more, and another room falls apart, and you're always just patching things up. But when you go in and you gut the house right down to the studs, you tear everything out, you get rid of the rot, you get rid of everything, and then you rebuild a brand new fresh house, and you don't stuff it full of stuff, then you have room to breathe, and then everything starts to make sense. But none of us, I love that. I'm not sure who that is, because it just came up as student. So whoever student is, I am so excited to hear from you. So it is so, these are the conversations that I feel like we need to be having in the fitness and the wellness industry, is about, it's not about why we're not doing it. It's about really why we're not doing it. It's about, oh, hey, Sherry. So it becomes about, why we're not doing the things that we really need to be doing. And a lot of people have said to me over the last couple of years, like, oh, you have a lot of courage to be talking about this. And it's like, look, this is not something that I wanted to do. I fought this for a really long time. And people who've worked with me, in retreats and in events and stuff, have heard, some more details of my story that I don't get into, in bigger public calls and things like that, because it comes back to the idea of not everybody's earned the right to hear our story. Not everybody understands where we're coming from or what we've been through. And I believe that, we need to have those spaces where we can be who we really are without fear of judgment. Now, I don't care if people hear all of my story anymore. There was a time when I did, but there's a time and a place to disclose that story, all of our stories. And that's not just for me, it's for everyone. And I love how Brené Brown says it, that not everyone has earned the right to hear your shame stories. And why we say shame stories is that most of the time they're not things that we should be feeling ashamed about, but we do. And we want to start telling the truth. And I had someone tell me recently, who said to me, my dad was a really bad alcoholic. And in the conversation that we had, she basically, she told me the story of how she grew up, and it was not nice. I mean, to most of us, you're listening to these stories and your heart is just breaking inside for those people, and for the children, and for what somebody didn't have and how they grew up. And you just realize, she said to me, I've never told anyone that. And I was like, wow, like that's a lot. She's like, I've never told anyone how bad it really was. And she said, I feel so much lighter because the truth heals. And that's really what it comes down to, is about, it's not about waving a flag. I mean, if you want to wave a flag, then that's totally fine. I have no problem with people waving a flag. But I want people to realize that it's what's right for you. It's what venue is right for you. For some people, it's having that one best friend that they can tell anything to and that they know that there's going to be no judgment. For some people, it's a counseling environment. For some people, it's a team of people. And for some people, it is a great group of people that they have. It's about finding what's right for you. And you know, the truth is where our freedom is. And we have been taught as a society, within our families, within every ounce of our being, to hide from the truth and to hide from what really is. We hide the things that we've done, the things that we've participated, who we used to be, and we pretend that we're not those things, and then we're always running from it. And when we're running away from the stories that make us who we are, so if you grew up in an alcoholic home, if you were raped, if you were, you know, if you had a child and gave it up for adoption, if you know, left your husband, if you had an affair, if he had an affair, if all of these different things have happened in our lives. And then throw in all the small things that happen, you know, the uncle that keeps telling you that you're fat, the aunt, you know, that keeps commenting on the size of your boobs, and like, you know, are you going to get I mean, any number of things. And the people who tormented you and bullied you as a child and told you that you were fat and ugly, and, you know, when you wore glasses and everybody called you four eyes. And I mean, you start to compound all of this stuff that happens to us in life. You know, and we didn't get, a lot of people, you know, you just emotionally, we didn't get what we needed a lot of the times, and we didn't know how to cope with it. Nobody taught us how to cope with it. So if you got upset about something, more often than not, you were told, go be a big girl or a big boy. Boys don't cry. And, you know, you got to be a big girl now, put your big girl pants up. And so you're sent off to just learn to cope, and we learn to shut down. And, you know, when we do, a lot of the times when we do have the courage to speak up, we're shut down. We're told what to talk about, what not to talk about. You know, you go out as children and your family's been a huge racket, and you go out in public and everybody acts like everything's fun and that there's nothing going on and you're a big happy family. And then you go back home and nobody's talking again. So we learn very young about what we are allowed and what we are not allowed to talk about. And that's how we go through life, is that we're all putting this image off, like, you know, this is the mask. I'm going to, you know, this is how I'm going to act. And then over time, this is why we can do it up until a certain age. But then over time, like, shit gets heavy. Like, you know, it all gets tangled up inside, and then stuff starts happening. You start blaming yourself and all your triggers and all your old coping skills, and everything starts working against you. And at some point in time, in order for you to heal that, you've got to be able to be willing to feel it. And the rock bottom comment was the best thing that could have been asked tonight. I've got to say, it took a lot of courage to even ask that. And the rock bottom comment is definitely because it's where a lot of people are afraid that, man, if I start going through this, I'm going to go down and I'm never going to get up. And at least right now, we convince ourselves that we're functioning. We're showing up for work, you know, and we got a paycheck, and I'm paying my mortgage, and, you know, on the surface, I'm keeping it all together, but inside you're dying. And inside, you're wishing that you could run away, and sometimes you're even you're engaging in reckless behavior. You go to bed at night. Sometimes you're wishing that you don't wake up in the morning. And we say, "Well, I'm not really suicidal," but I mean, those are suicidal behaviors and they're suicidal thoughts. It's just in your mind, you might not actually have a plan, and you know in your heart that you wouldn't do anything. But it becomes a very slippery slope for people. And it becomes a way that when we don't deal with these things, they become very real things that start showing up for us. I mean, we got to question the fact that more than half of Canadians are on antidepressants, and yet most people still say that they're still having anxiety and depression. Why? Because a lot of the times that these are all just Band-Aids that we cover up. And I really like the analogy that Linda gave is about that stuff. So I'm so happy that this conversation came up tonight. It was great. So how do we shift our mindset? How do we change? Now, I'm going to use the fitness analogy, but you can change this to anything that you want in life. Because remember the analogy that I used about hating your job. Now, right now, you might be in a position in your life where you need that money and you need that job. So quitting it is not an ideal solution. Maybe you're at a place where you really freaking hate the gym and you really freaking hate exercise, but you know you got to do something. Like the line is in the sand and you really need to change your life. So how do you do that? So this is my technique, and I love to do this. I love to do it all the time. So if I have to do this, how can I love it? It's that simple. That is my number one mindset shifting technique for myself. If I have to go for a run right now, then how can I do this and have a level 10 experience? If I have to do this, how can I have a level 10 experience? Now you might be like, okay, there's no way I'm having a level 10 experience if I'm running, but at least can I get to a level 6? Can I get to a level 7? Like where can I, what can I do that's going to up my level? So if I have to go to the gym, if I have to go and do this job today, how can I have a good day? And so our thoughts start to shift. We start to look forward to enjoying it. And that comes with consistency. That's not, I'm going to go out today and I'm going to go for a run. When I started running again in December, I had taken over a year off of running because, rock bottom and all that stuff. And when I started running again, I was not in any mood to run, but I knew that for my mind, for my mental health and my emotional health, I really knew that running was the right answer for me. So I started running and I went out every day and I was like, man, I friggin' hate running. I battled that thought for about a month. And then I was like, okay, remember, you've got to do this mindset shifting, Tanya. You know this, you know how to do all this work. You've done it on so many other things. Let's do it for running. So I got out there on the trails and I started, okay, how can I enjoy this? And I started playing little games with myself. Like, can I get here in this amount of time? And can I get there in this amount of time? And, I would start thinking about programs and courses that I wanted to do, or I would start thinking about what I wanted my body to look like when I've rebuilt it from a completely different place. And I wanted to think about some of the fitness events that I wanted to do. So all of a sudden it became fun again. And I know that sounds a little bit disbelieving, but you can do that for anything. You can do it for your job. You can do it for, the certain people in your life that maybe you cannot really, you find it difficult to tolerate, yet you move into that. So, and the same thing goes of how we can actually, so here's the bonus. The same thing that we can do is how can you change how much you love unhealthy things. So if you can change your mindset about the things that you don't love, that you really need to start loving, like fitness and eating healthy and loving your job and loving money and loving all of those things, then how can you change your unhealthy things? So this is what I did when I quit smoking. I started to associate smoking with cancer. Now, I know lots of people smoke their whole lives and don't get cancer, but I used to think about it like, Tanya, if you're smoking all the time and like you get cancer, are you going to be okay with knowing that like you smoked all the time and you got cancer? I was not okay with that. And that became a big association for me to actually quit smoking. And the same thing happens sometimes with certain foods that like I was addicted to, like candy and, things like that. Then I would be like, okay, how can I make this a level 1 experience? And so when I need to do something really healthy and something that's going to be good for me, I go, how can I have a level 10 experience? And I play with that. And when I want to do something, when I need to change my mindset about something that is more unhealthy for me, how can I change my mind about that? Like I completely changed my mind about takeout. And if I've eaten takeout like 6 times in 10 years, like fast food takeout, like drive-through takeout, if I've eaten like takeout, maybe I say 6 times, like a dozen or so times over the last 10 years, that is it. I eat out, but like I'll usually go to like a restaurant or something like that and sit down and actually order things. I will have a burger or things like that occasionally, but like I actually completely changed my mindset by using this. How can I have a level 1 experience if I'm having this? So, I started to associate like eating fast food with pains in my stomach, unhealthy feelings, fatigue. So now when I think about that, I'm like, ugh, And I don't even know why I don't like it. It's not about the taste. It's actually, I've associated all the negative feelings with it. Whereas when you love unhealthy stuff, most likely you're associating all those first initial unhealthy things. That you're like, oh my God, the taste, the great, like it tastes so good. And you're like really loving all that unhealthy stuff and like the chips and the pop and the cigarettes. And you love those first couple of pieces of it. And that's what you associate with. Even if you get halfway through it and you don't love it, every time you go to do it, you think about that initial feeling that you get when you do it. So instead of thinking about the initial feeling, start to reframe so that you start to think about what's not so good. So you start to go, okay, well, I eat pizza like 5 days a week from like the pizza shop down the road, and I really need to stop that. So how can you go, okay, you know what, how can I change my mind about this pizza shop and this pizza, and what else can I, maybe how can I have a level 1 experience with takeout pizza, but a level 10 experience with homemade pizza made from like whole wheat dough and like tons of veggies and like, tofu or chicken or, whatever on the top. How can I have a level 10 experience with a healthy version of pizza and a level 1 experience with like the greasy, like meat lovers, like heart attack on a pan, plate? How can I have a level 1 experience? And that is my number 1 secret of how I've changed my life. I'm not even kidding with you. I do everything that I do, and I teach this. This is a big trick that I teach to a lot of my clients is, how am I going to do this? If I need to start liking something, then how can I have a level 10 experience with this so that I'm really focused on opening my mind to that? And if I need to change something and start to really dislike something that is unhealthy for me, but that I totally love, like cigarettes for me was a big thing. And how can I change that experience? So when I change that experience, how can I have a level 1 experience? So that is the big bonus of like my number 1 mindset shifting technique, which is it really works. So I want you to do it, but I want you to remember that it doesn't work because you did it once. It works because you consistently do it. You have to consistently do it. And then one day someone's going to ask you if you want to go to McDonald's, and you're going to throw up on their shoes, and it's going to be awesome. And then you're going to text me and tell me that it worked. So that's what happens. So now I'm going to take another sip of water, and then I'm going to tell you all about the 5-day challenge, and then we're going to get ready to clue up unless you have some questions. So I am doing a 5-day challenge because this is a big piece of like introducing Wild Soul Wellness to the world. Now, a lot of what we've done in TW Fitness is still coming with us, parts of it. We've let go of some parts that just no longer fit with the new brand and the new image and what our role is in the world. So in saying, we're here, a lot of people have been watching what I've been doing over the last couple of years, but the brand change really made people kind of open their eyes and go, oh, she really is doing a lot of different things now. So this 5-day challenge is really about creating not just brand, it is about creating brand awareness for Wild Soul Wellness so that people start to recognize what we do and how we're different, but it is also about really showing people what we do. So it gives you a chance to really get an inside look at some of these things that I do so that, someday down the road, if you're looking for something or you're in the market for something, then, maybe you'll come and you'll think about us, think about my company when we're doing this. And a part of what I want to do with this challenge is to really tap people into looking on the inside. Because if I'm going to end diets forever, that's the mission of the company, is to end dieting forever, then we need to help as many people as possible end dieting forever. So what I look at with this 5-day challenge is whether or not you're ready to move into something, within the next little while is irrelevant. What I want you to start thinking about, I want to plant some seeds in your mind so that you can start to look at these inner conflicts that you didn't realize that you had. I want to help you identify patterns that interfere with you reaching your goals so that you say, okay, that's it. I'm joining this program and I'm on. And then 3 days into it, you're like at the drive-thru, and then you're berating yourself and you're beating yourself up because you failed again. And so really helping you, see some of the rules that you have that have been really interfering with your ability to get things. I want to make you aware of the figure 8 cycle that you have and start to help you identify some ways of ending that figure 8 and those cycles that you're in. And really about teaching you a whole new way of doing things. And then if that starts to impact you in your life and you start to make those changes, then you start to influence other people. And it becomes a trickle out effect, is that I can't change the world's dieting alone. I need to help people, and then those people to have that conversation with other people in their lives so that when you've permanently changed your life, or you're really, you're no longer dieting, you're sitting at the table and you're eating like a sandwich and people are like, I thought you were on a diet. And you're like, yeah, I'm not on a diet, I'm on a lifestyle thing, and it's okay to eat a sandwich every now and then, right? And people become shocked. They see you are happy, you're healthy, you've lost weight, you look fit, you look great, you're feeling great, you're very positive, and you're eating food that doesn't fit the diet mentality because we're not on diets anymore, and that we eat balanced approach to actually sustain our life. And when I help you, whether it's on a 5-day free challenge or it's on a program, then when you start to implement these things into your life, and then you go out and you help your mother, your sister, your brother, your coworkers, and you start having these conversations with them, then we have the opportunity of changing the world. And that's how we do this. We do it together, not alone, not behind closed doors, not behind pretending that everything's fine. We do it because we're going to be willing to actually tackle the work. And so what this 5-day challenge really is about allowing you to look within and start figuring out, okay, well, start to make sense of what Wild Soul Wellness is really talking about. So not just coming on this webinar and saying, okay, yes, this makes sense, but to actually use the next 5 days to really implement some of these things. So we're going to get started tomorrow. If you've been signed up on the email list, then you are going to get an email about it. Now, if you didn't make the email list and you got the link for the Zoom call on Facebook, then make sure that you go back and you look at the grand opening and you sign up for that so that you actually get the emails, because we are running it through an email system. So tomorrow we'll be sending out the first one. It's totally free. If you don't want to do it, then you can just click unsubscribe on those emails, or you can participate as much as you want. Maybe you want to read the emails, but you're not yet ready to do the full challenge, but this becomes the part of the conversation where I'm planting a new seed, a new way of looking at things and a new way of being and doing things when it comes to weight loss, is that realizing that, the weight or our lack of health is a manifestation of the problem. So if you're sitting there and, you don't have any weight to lose and you go, well, I'm not overweight, but I really need to be taking care of myself. And, I keep saying that my health is important, but I'm not actually showing up for myself and I'm not doing it. This is no different than the person who might have 100 pounds to lose, who is sitting there going, I really need to change my life, but I'm not doing it. So at the end of the day, sometimes we might have better genetics than someone else, or sometimes we have different coping skills. Somebody else's coping skills might be to smoke and another person's coping skill might be to eat. So we're going to look very physically different, but it doesn't mean that our problems come from the same place. And what we start to realize is that the actual problem with looking at our body is that that's a manifestation of the problem. It's not the actual problem. The problem is oftentimes things that are inside of us that we haven't allowed ourselves to see that are still problems. And part of that comes from that the way we've been raised, the way society has taught us to actually go through life and to deal with things. So this is part of the 5-day challenge. We are also going to be doing a big blitz this week. So a ton of our programs are going to be on sale. So we'll be posting on the Facebook page. I'll be going live from my Facebook page each day to talk about, what programs we offer and things like that. So if it is time and it's the right time for you, then this is going to be a great week for you to get in, because things are going for a third of the price, a lot of things, as we kind of, just jump out into the world and say, hey, we're here. So if this is a week where you are actually thinking about that you're ready for something, then, keep your eyes open as some of those sales start to come out. And otherwise, the challenge is going to happen. Wild Soul Wellness is here. The purpose of us being here is to end diets forever by teaching people the tools to look within and fix those broken patterns and habits so that we can actually go after what it is in life that we want, by realizing that we are worth it and that we can have absolutely everything that we want. So if you have questions, now is a great time to pop them in. Otherwise, we're going to clue up and end the call. I'm so honored and grateful that you came on here, that you are wherever you are, whether you've been following with TW Fitness forever, and that you followed me into this journey, or if you're brand new to coming into this conversation with us. I think it becomes a very important conversation. I think that this is how we heal things. Is the diet industry is a multi-billion-dollar industry. And when we look at it, we have the highest rates of obesity that we've ever had in the world. So we have to start having a different conversation about what's really going on. And that's where this starts. And that's what Wild Soul Wellness is about. And you're all a part of that, just by your willingness to be a part of a new conversation. So wherever you are in this, it doesn't matter if you're not ready, for another 5 years, it's not relevant. What's relevant is that you start to become a part of a new conversation. And, we're going to get there when we get there, and we all learn the way we learn, and things show up for us when we're ready for something new. So a lot of the times it's no coincidence that we're here. So thank you so much for coming on. I'm really sorry that I didn't get to pop on video tonight. I must have to do an update or something for my computer, because my hair is all done. I got earrings in, lipstick on, and nobody even got to see me. I'll probably have to do a selfie or something and post it on TV or something. Thanks so much, Tanya, for being you and being brave enough to be open about your struggles and the way you overcame it. Thank you so much, Suzanne. That really means a lot, because I know for a lot of us, it is about, it takes a lot of courage. And that's been, if you could see me, I wear a necklace, an affirmation circle necklace around my neck that says courage. And it's because I can't do this work if I don't have the courage to speak about my own struggles. And I can't do this work if I'm going to be fake and not talk about the real stories and not talk about the things that I've been through and the struggles that I've overcome and overcoming the darkness and all of that stuff. And that becomes the reality is that we have to have, it takes a lot of courage to do this work. So thank you for seeing that. And, I hope that inside that you'll find that courage that you have, because we all have it. We're afraid, and it's normal to be completely afraid when you've lived a life where up until now, where you've been encouraged to stay behind curtains and close doors and put on masks and everything else. So it takes a lot of courage to take those masks off. And I have no doubt that all of you that are on this call are in some varying level of finding that courage within yourself. And it's just about finding it, tapping into it, and realizing that, what, man, life's too short. You could be dead tomorrow. It's kind of my motto in life now is, look, I don't know when it's all going to end. So I'm going to live my life for myself and to the fullest. And I got to show up for myself in ways that, I'm not going to play small anymore. 6 years into living a healthy lifestyle, but now I feel like I can't stop. I've passed several goals I have for my weight, and I get scared when I don't have a goal to reach. Will the 5-day challenge help me be satisfied with my body now? Be satisfied that I am enough. I don't know that I would say that it will make you feel satisfied with things, but I think it will. What the 5-day challenge will do is it will allow you to see any conflicts that you have. So then you'll know where your work is. And I hope that answers that question, is that, it is a 5-day challenge. So it's not going to be able in that amount of time to really cover sometimes some of the deeper levels of work, but it will allow you to identify what that deep level of work is so that you can start to work on that. It will allow, oh, you're awesome. I love you. I love you too, Linda. I can't wait to see you at the retreat again. It's going to be awesome. It's only like 3 weeks away, which is so cool. So I would say that we only have so much time and things that we can cover in a 5-day challenge, but it will be a really good thing for you to be able to start identifying some of those conflicts that you have. And then you know where your work is. And that's really what the challenge is going to be about, is actually teaching people that this isn't frou-frou and it's not a bunch of bullshit, and it's not, that you want to see, where you are with all of this stuff. And that should help you kind of identify some of the patterns and the figure eights that you have. And I will give you tools for sure that you can start implementing right away, but there will become a deeper level of work that most people will have to do after this. So I am so honored, so grateful that you've all been here. I love you all. Thank you so much for trusting me to have these conversations, to come on, to ask the questions, to be brave enough to kind of get out there and be part of a whole new conversation. It takes a lot to even show up to some of this stuff. So I definitely thank you and I honor you. Namaste is where, the divine light in me recognizes and bows down to the divine light in you. And that all we have to do every single day is remember who we really are, not who the world told us to be. And when we look inside, we can find the answers that we've been searching for outside of ourselves. And when we calm things down, take a couple of deep breaths, reconnect with who we really are, a lot of the times we'll get our answers for what's the next right step when we do that. So thank you so much for coming. It's been an honor and a privilege. I will see you hopefully tomorrow in the inbox and on my next Facebook Live. So make sure that you follow the Facebook Live, because I'm going to be going live every single day this week. So have an amazing night. Thank you so much for coming.